for all. Justice under the law. Justice the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a joy. Oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights. Respecting human rights. What a wonderful nation this could be. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal.
Happy Monday, happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Justice with the JFJ team. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice. As usual, just want to say thank you so much for those who are joining us via the nationwide YouTube platform, as well as those who are listening in via Radioland, those who continue to support via the JFJ's YouTube platform. Thank you so much for your usual company. All right, I'm flying solo today, but I will ensure that you remain in good company as we hear from some of our young people. I think it's good that we always have youth voices on issues that affect young people, voices from those who are children, just to get a sense of their perspective of what is important to them, what they want our parliamentarians and the wider society to focus on as we advocate for improvement to child rights, as we advocate for our children to be better protected in society, as we advocate for better and improved legislation. Very, very important to hear from them. So we're going to be joined by Noel Lewin. He is one of our young advocate. And we're also going to be joined by Karen Dawson. She is a youth policy committee member of Free Children Foundation. Also Dashawn Carter, who is an advocate with Jamaica Youth Advocate Network. Bright people. And, I look forward to having conversations with them in short order. Now, before we get into the topic, as usual, we just have our trivia question. And the question is, at what age can a child consent to medical, surgical, and dental treatment without the consent of their parents? So, at what age can a child consent to medical, surgical, and dental treatment without the consent of their parents? In other words, at what age can a child go to a doctor without getting the permission of their parents and getting treatment on their own? And this is a big issue when you talk about adolescent sexual and reproductive health rights. And there was actually an adolescent sexual and reproductive health rights policy with the Ministry of Health. I think it still remains a draft, not yet published, but these are important sexual and reproductive health issues that affect young people. So just remember to answer that question and you can win a small prize. All right. Now, our Did You Know for today, continuing with the topic of our children, our Did You Know for today. Now, every time we talk about children, we talk about the best interest of the child. And if you read the Child Care and Protection Act or any piece of legislation that deals with children protection and promotion of child rights, you will see this concept of best interest of the child. So, did you know the best interest of the child is important when enforcing the Child Care and Protection Act? This means we must consider protecting them from abuse or threat of harm, providing support services for family, and taking the child's view into account. And, the last part of what I said is very, very important because a lot of times we're talking about child rights issues, what affecting them and so on, but we don't practice this concept of agency of the child, which is important in ensuring that children are a part of the conversation, constructive dialogue. So whatever issues affect them, they are instrumental to the development of policies and laws for their own benefit. So the principle of best interest of the child is not just recognizing the vulnerability of a child and responding accordingly, but also recognizing the agency of the child, where the child ought to be a part of any national dialogue that speaks to their, well-being, what affects them, and so on. All right? So just keep that in mind. Now, we are aware that there is a protest happening following that disturbing video that emerged on social media last week, where a nurse was seen being physically assaulted and violated in the most gruesome way. And the perpetrator seen in the video, based on news from the Jamaica Constabulary Force, has since been charged with multiple offenses. Now, we just want to stand in solidarity with our nurses and the call for ending gender-based violence and violence against our women and girls. Last week, we were all in mourning and continue to be in mourning following the brutal death of young Kelsey. And over the weekend, we see where news emerged that a UTech student who was missing remains were found, which suggest that it may likely be hers. And I think I'm wearing black today, but the symbol of the color being worn by the nurses, which symbolizes an end to violence against women, I think I can say most of us are standing with them and what they're advocating for. When you look at Jamaica's statistics when it comes to violence against women, 1 in 4 women are physically abused in our society. When you look at what women tend to experience in terms of domestic violence, and when you look at the wider culture around rape and sexual assault, we have a problem in our society. And I've been listening to the dialogue that is happening in social media around what laws ought to be changed and so on. And I want us to stand together in calling on our parliamentarians to get to work when it comes to the legislative framework. Last year we heard that a joint select committee was convened for the Domestic Violence Act. From what I understand, having followed up with Parliament, that committee met only twice, and the country is unaware as to the status of that committee. So we need the Domestic Violence Act to be reviewed, and we need the amended version to be passed. We've heard about the legislative incongruence when it comes to the carrying of pepper spray and mace. At what point will our parliamentarians address that seeming confusion in the law and have women being able to carry the pepper spray and the mace to protect themselves? I think we have to get to a point where we stop waiting on these outrageous and unfortunate incidents to occur before our parliament gets to work on some of these matters. We lament on issues after they happen rather than taking a proactive step in getting things done. Now, when we talk about the wider culture of violence against women, looking at issues of rape, looking at issues of domestic violence, I think as a society, we also need some introspection. Far too many of us are willing to be a silent bystander. It's not my business. How many people report if they observe someone being violated? How many of us utilize the 211 when it comes to child abuse? We need some introspection when it comes to the community level. How we respond as citizens. I shared on this very program that last year, a little over a year ago, JFJ went into the communities to look at this very issue. Violence against women and girls, and how people see some of the matters around marital rape and so on. And I'm pleased to say that we've advanced in our perspectives and views when it comes to marital rape, where a lot of people say no. It's now time to remove the exemptions when it comes to marital rape, where a husband can rape his wife no matter the circumstances. But when we ask the question, should we increase the age of consent to 18 years or have it remain at 16? And we were in the communities, we were told by several women, no, have the age of consent be reduced from 16 to even a lower age. And their reasoning was that the girl child is bad already, and therefore reduce it to even 14 years because the girl child is somehow tempting the big man. When you look at what the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution cite as some of the reasons for not securing convictions and so on, especially in the rural communities, it's because of the attitude that we have towards rape. We have a rape culture in Jamaica. Far too many people are silent. And unless we deal with the culture and the socio-cultural norms that exist in our society, we won't eradicate this negative aspect of our culture. So as we protest with our nurses today, as citizens, as parliamentarians, we have work to do in the Houses of Parliament, but also as communities, we have to look within, is my humble opinion on this matter. All right, so we have some of our guests online, young, bright people, as I was saying, and we need to get their perspectives, yes? But we're going to first take the break, and then we return and we pick up with these people, and I'm sure you'll be as impressed as I am.
The environment takes center stage this Labor Day, Friday, May 23, under the theme, The Environment, Our Land, Our Duty, Our Future. Play your part in preserving our environment. Put some voluntary labor into Labor Day in your community, anywhere across Jamaica. Jamaica Nice. Protect with Paradise.
Farmore Pharmacy is a family pharmacy that provides prescriptions and a wide variety of over-the-counter medicines and medical supplies. Their friendly and knowledgeable staff are available to answer your questions concerning prescriptions and healthcare. Ask about their loyalty programs. For more information on their offerings, visit Farmore Pharmacy at 42 Main Street, Maypen, or call 876-986-2405. Farmore Pharmacy, giving you far more for less.
What's the standing of the JLP and the PNP in Southeast St. Elizabeth? Southwest St. Elizabeth? Western St. Mary? And where do the parties stand nationally? What's the gap, if any, between Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Opposition Leader Mark Golding? Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM from 6 a.m. on Monday, May 26 for the findings from the latest Nationwide Blue Dot polls, powered by Total Tools.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. Now it's Child's Month, and we are promoting the protection of our children, the rights of our children, just to ensure that they are front and center as we celebrate them. And to have that discussion, we're joined by several young people today. We just want to hear their perspectives on what are some of the issues that they believe should be front and center in the national dialogue and discourse, what they see as some of the challenges that would see our children not being as protected as they would like, So we're joined by Noel is on his way. He's going to be in studio with me. Looking forward to having him in company. Karen Dawson from Free Children. She's a youth policy committee member. And Deshawn Carter. She is an advocate and projects assistant with Jamaica Youth Advocates Network. Good afternoon to you all.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, Deshawn, you're a young man, and I'm saying she. Deshawn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing
Okay.
you. My apologies. I'm often
That's
misgendered
okay.
myself. Michaela, I see a lot of Mr. Jackson, so I apologize from someone who also receives that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much for joining. And Karen,
Yes, good afternoon.
good afternoon. Pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you both for joining. We are still waiting on Noel, who will be with us in studio. But before I start asking the questions, I'm just going to ask you, just introduce yourself to the nationwide listeners, who you are and what exactly you're passionate about. I'll start with you, Dashawn.
All right. So, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dashawn Carter, and I'm a youth advocate and currently serving as a projects assistant here at the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network. I'm a first-year university student at the University of the West Indies, studying law. And I would say that I'm passionate about human rights advocacy, advocating for issues that affect young people, young individuals like myself, and trying to seek out and work for a better Jamaica, one where we're all respected, one where we're all protected, and our rights are equally and justly observed.
Great. Thank you so much, Dashawn. Karen?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Karen Dawson. I am a volunteer with the Free Children Foundation. I am currently a final year student at the Norman Manley Law School. In terms of my interests, I have a passion for advocating and ensuring that children's rights are realized, especially as it relates to the right to health, which has come to the forefront in recent discussions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And in studio with me is Noel. Noel,
Hello,
just
good
introduce
afternoon,
yourself
everyone.
and what you're passionate about.
Okay, so my name is Noel Lewin Jr., and I'm a second year law student. I am passionate about the law, human rights specifically, and also international relations, so diplomacy. I am a member of the youth arm for the Jamaicans for Justice. And also, I'm in the capacity of the founder of a mental health organization called the Global Integration Society that is very dear to me as well. So I'm really passionate about mental health. So looking forward to the fruitful conversation around that.
Listeners, you remember what I said? These are impressive young people, all future attorneys, yes? So we are grateful to hear their perspectives. So let me go back to Dashawn, right? What youth issue or child rights issue you think should be front and center? So if you had the most honorable Dr. Andrew Holness in front of you and the leader of the opposition, Mr. Mark Golding, and you're saying to them both, this is what I want to hear from you as current Prime Minister, leader in waiting, given that we're up on an election, what exactly would you want them to focus on?
Well, I think it'll be difficult to just pick out one issue, especially since they're so interlocked. But if I had to choose, I would definitely say child nutrition, and the issue of, the prevalence of NCDs, how common it is within our
Non-communicable
children,
diseases,
especially
yes.
yes, yes, non-communicable diseases, and its impacts on academic outcomes, child behavior, mental health, and all other aspects and facets of children's lives.
Karen?
For me, I would say, in addition to that, I think a recent discussion has come up recently about the issue of children in conflict with the law, specifically the imposition of mandatory minimum sentences as it relates to these children. As we will be able to see on the international stage, this is something that is largely frowned upon and has been condemned by groups such as the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. So I would say that's something else that should be brought to the attention of the Prime Minister.
Great, thank you so much. And for those who are listening in, remember the mandatory minimum sentence is what you've been hearing us talking about. I think we spoke about it a few weeks ago on this program as well, wherein the judge's hands will be tied, and the legislation is basically saying when a child is convicted of an offense, the courts must impose a minimum term before that child becomes eligible for parole. All right, Noel, over to you.
Well, for me, I will definitely say mental health. As I mentioned earlier, mental health is something very dear to me because as a young person myself, I know for a fact that if the mind is not in the right place, we can't function, at our best, and we can't function whether academically or just how we're supposed to function in society. So I would say to the government that mental health is very important, and I would be bold enough to say that I don't think this issue is properly addressed by the government. It is swept under the carpet, whether it is conversation wise or funding wise, and they fail to realize that mental health is at are in every aspect of our lives. So whether it is students, how students are performing, whether it is conflict, the violent prevalence of violence in our community or country as a whole, mental health has a big factor to play. And until we really assess the effects of the connection between mental health and some of these issues, other issues that we face in our country, then we will continue to face the consequences of that. So I would say mental health is something I would definitely recommend that we
Yeah.
look more into.
All right. I just want to focus then the conversation on these three core issues that you've all identified. Obviously, we can't go in too much detail because we don't have the time. But I would just like to hear each of your perspectives on the school nutrition, the mandatory minimum, and the mental health that you raised as challenges. So, just in order, let's just go back to the school nutrition. I know Dashawn raised that, but Dashawn, what exactly is the core challenge? Is it a case where parents were not doing enough? Every Friday, we're ordering in KFC and so on for our children. I'm guilty of that as well. It's easy. Is it a case where we're not paying attention to labels, or what exactly is the issue to talk about school nutrition?
So,
Dashawn.
before I go ahead, I'd also like to add, or if I am able to, I think it'd be disingenuous of me to leave the conversation without bringing up the issue also of violence against children. I think that's something that definitely needs to be discussed, and if we have the time, I'd love to see us delve into that. But with regards to the actual issue around child nutrition and its inadequacies, I think it has to do a host of things. So one, as you would have rightly mentioned, the lack of proper labeling systems in place. It also has to do with the the lack of safety systems or regulatory policies, strong regulatory policies within our schools to ensure that our school food environments are reflective and conducive to healthy eating practices and can protect children from ultra processed foods that are high in nutrients of concerns like sugar, salt, saturated fats, and all other things that are detrimental to the health of children, but also just understanding that with beyond just obesity and overweight, children in schools are also facing issues of food insecurity. A lot of children are coming to school and wouldn't have eaten breakfast, wouldn't have eaten something from their homes, and are unable to afford the food that's being sold in their canteens. And so this will unfortunately resulting them going throughout the day without eating a proper or a substantial meal. And of course, this will have negative ramifications on their academic outcomes, their ability to concentrate in class, and other aspects.
Is there a call? I know you mentioned, the adequate labeling of what we're consuming, which is very, very important. Ensuring that we meet those international standards. And I know there is a school nutrition policy. I believe it was
It
given
was
to the
tabled in
cabinet. The
yes, tabled
cabinet,
in
yeah.
Parliament.
Okay, good, good, good. What exactly is the call from the government, though, when it comes to provision of schools within schools, provision of food, sorry, within schools? Is there any call in that respect? I remember growing up, I used to have access to Nutribullet. At the time, I had a 50 cent. It was Marcus Garvey on that 50 cent. At what we could get some discounted food. I'm showing my age in your 40, but it's fine. Is there any such call from you as a youth advocate?
Okay, so the school nutrition policy, as you would have mentioned, really deals with the school feeding program and seeks to ensure that the food that children are getting within our schools are reflective, as I would have said, of the nutritional value and content that they should be getting. The school nutrition policy also seeks to ensure that concessionaires and other food providers within the schools and around the schools, because it also covers like a 200 meter radius around schools, so that may include vendors and other food providers, to ensure that one, they're up to standard, the nutritional standards that the ministry themselves have provided, and two, that they're providing our children with safe and healthy food to meet their daily requirements. And also just to ensure that, or one of the calls that the ministry would have made in implementing or outlining the school nutrition policy is that they would have provided nutritional guidelines, both for the actual creation of food for children and also for the curriculum that the children will benefit from. So it's not just about providing healthy food within the school food environment, but also teaching students or empowering teachers and students to make healthy choices both within the school environment and at home
At
and throughout
home.
their lives.
Good, good. All right, we're going to take the break. I ask you all to still stay with us and we pick up the conversation.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
31 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 30 out west in Montego Bay.
Fairview Medical and Dental and Fairview Beachside Medical, the leading health centers, operate 24/7 with round-the-clock ambulance, emergency, and inpatient services, with specialties in areas like primary health care, pediatrics, cardiology, maternity OBGYN, podiatry, chiropractic care, and orthopedics. They're ready to tackle your illnesses. Visit Suite Number 5, Fairview Office Park, Alice Eldemire Drive, Montego Bay. Telephone 876-979-8589. And Fairview Beachside Medical, Unit Number 14, Sunshine Village, West End Road, Negril, Westmoreland. Telephone 876-536-1199.
The environment takes center stage this Labor Day, Friday, May 23, under the theme, The Environment, Our Land, Our Duty, Our Future. Play your part in preserving our environment. Put some voluntary labor into Labor Day in your community, anywhere across Jamaica. Jamaica Nice. Protect with paradise.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're here with our young people, bright future attorneys with us. We have Noel in studio, Karen and Dashawn joining us via Zoom and telephone. And we're discussing advancing child rights in Jamaica from their perspective. What are the issues? What are some of the policy recommendations that they are making? And importantly, their role in the process, because far too often you're hearing from civil society organization, but when you look at these young people, they have organizations themselves, they are part of other groups just promoting issues that are important to them. So before the break, we were hearing from Dashawn, who spoke quite well to the issue of school nutrition. You heard about the school nutrition policy, the status of it, and what exactly it is hoped to achieve. So we're going to be turning our attention now to Karen, just to speak to the issue that she raised, and that is mandatory minimum sentence for children. What exactly is the issue, Karen?
So the issue is that, as you had indicated earlier, when you had, given your summary after I had spoken the first time, is that when you have a mandatory minimum sentence, essentially the judge's hands are tied, and they can't impose a sentence less than that sentence, or for a term less than that sentence. So the issue here is that internationally it is accepted that looking at acting in the best interest of the child and protecting children, and also with regard to the child's right to liberty, that truthfully imprisonment should be a last resort. In tying the judge's hands like this, it makes it difficult or near impossible to resort to imprisonment as the last port of call, essentially. And what happens is that by relying on imprisonment, or even by looking at a method such as child diversion that has been put in to try and really, after the fact, address children in conflict with the law. The problem is that neither of these really get to the root of the issue before the child commits an offense, before they get the opportunity to commit an offense. Essentially, it's like trying to, after you've gotten an injury, and then trying to put a Band-Aid over it afterwards, instead of really addressing what the root cause is. So I'm sure Noah will get into the weeds of that, and indicating that, for example, mental health of our children, especially post-COVID, is very important and is one of the things that has led to an increase of children in conflict with the law. As you can see, for example, just by the increased wave of violence in schools between children themselves, that has led to some children being, committing the crime of murder, for example. That would again put them in the situation of being potentially subject to this mandatory minimum sentence.
Yes. Not being able to really deal with the conflict resolution and so on.
Yes, so all of those core skills, like not just dealing with what the child themselves might be going on or having issues with within their own mind or within their own household, but also just equipping them from beforehand with the ability to, as you said, peacefully resolve disputes. And in terms of issues, you can see, I remember when I was in prep school, which may not be that long ago, but I remember up until about 2013, maybe 2012 or 11, that we used to have a Peace in Schools initiative that I think was way more prominent at the time, which is something that bringing that back or reinforcing that or strengthening that is something that can, again, intervene before children get the chance or the opportunity or get themselves in the unfortunate situation of committing a crime, before it's too late or before it's a reactive response to the situation.
What would be your call, Karen, to the Honorable Minister Delroy Chuck, Minister of Justice, who is the minister who is piloting the 3 pieces of legislation or bills related to a mandatory minimum? When it comes to children, what would be your call to the good minister?
So the first thing I want to say to the good minister is that in no way are we saying that there are never situations when imprisonment may be the recourse that you're seeking. However, again, it's the last recourse. So accordingly, a mandatory minimum sentence is wholly inappropriate as it relates to specifically children. What should be focused on instead is trying to bolster some of the programs that we had in the past, such as Peace in Schools or I was recently told that maybe bringing back civics and things like that may help children to get a better appreciation of not just only how to self-regulate in terms of when they, are upset and then before they take any steps, but also alternative dispute resolution methods, creating spaces where, as I'm sure Noah will go into in more detail, where any issues that they have mental health-wise or within the home, that they feel comfortable turning to someone to speak to that and having it addressed before it bubbles over and reaches to a point where, again, they've put themselves in a situation that's very difficult to come out of.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. Noel, as parents, sometimes you ask your child, "How was school today?" And they respond, "Boy, it's stressful." And you say, "What stress? You're not paying no bill in here."
You're not in a stress.
You have a stress. Would I go school, go take your book, and come back home and relax?
Yeah.
Are we not being considerate as adults of the challenges that children are going through? And what is the issue?
Definitely, I can testify that that is a statement that many young people hear from their parents. As them would say, "Oh, you're not paying a bill, so you're not going to stress about everything."
And let me know who show
You
the JPS bill to my son.
Yeah, so that's something that many parents say to their children, and I think they don't really understand that we go through other things, whether it is social media, whether it is bullying at school. Sometimes we have personal things that we're going through, and they don't give us the environment to like freely express ourselves, or we don't feel comfortable enough to tell them. And so pointing out like being comfortable, a lot of us have certain situation as young people where we don't know who to tell. And sometimes we grow up in a space where we keep things to ourselves, or we buckle it up, and then it affects how we behave and how we interact with people. So probably you see us be more withdrawn from like friendships and conversations and all that. So it has a lot of effects on the social well-being of young people. And I must point out like the conflict in schools, as was mentioned earlier. Some students, because them don't know how to express themselves and express what them are go through, them turn to violence, like them take it out on other students as well. So that's why I have a lot of students that them become bullies, because
Yes. They don't have that outlet.
Exactly. Them don't know how to express what they are going through to feel better about themselves. So as was mentioned again, I guess my contribution is already, fleshed out. As it relates to like creating a space, I definitely agree with that. In our schools specifically, like we have to start somewhere, and I think the youths are, the starting point when it comes on to like having more open conversation about mental health or what we're going through, providing that space and also providing the resources that they need, whether it is equipping our guidance counselors better to deal with our students, or having more than one guidance counselor, because I think there was a conversation around like the ratio between guidance counselor and the students that they have to counsel.
And ratio between guidance counselors and schools. You may have one guidance counselor Monday and Tuesday of this school, Wednesday and Thursday another. So you're taking that kind of roster approach.
Yeah, so that is an area for concern for the government. We need to fix that as well. And I always think that it's because of the importance that we put on mental health and psychology and guidance and counseling, because a lot of students at UWI, they don't do guidance and counseling because they must say, oh, them now can't find a job, or them now get good pay. So it's a whole issue that the government really needs to probably invite some young people so that we can shed some light on certain concerns that we have, and we see how best we can ratify or remedy the situation as best as possible, because again, mental health is so important, and as was highlighted, it affects many different areas of our society that are also as important, such as crime and violence.
Yeah.
And the conflict starting at the school or starting at the community and affect the whole society. So it's a really important issue that we need to address now.
You know, I before we segue into the issue of violence against children, and I get your perspectives on that, because I know Dashawn wanted some focus, and we can extend the time to address it. But to you, Noel, what would you say to parents and communities wherein when you look at our sociocultural norms, you know, if a child speaks, oh, this generation, uno too touches, uno too overly sensitive,
Yeah, get big.
right? And especially when it comes to our boys, are we giving that space for boys to cry, to have an outlet to express themselves and be emotionally vulnerable?
I'm glad you mentioned boys, because again, it's a social issue and it's a cultural issue. Like it's a big issue, as we're pointing out. We don't provide the space. We don't talk about mental health enough, and also try to mitigate the effects of it on everybody. And when it comes on to like males specifically, like it's a culture issue where males are supposed to cry, none at all. Males are supposed to express themselves, because if you start tell people how you feel, they might say, oh, yeah, girl, or you know, this and that, and all the names of them want to call you, because man nothing do that, man nothing show no sign of weakness. So it's just a cultural thing where we grew up and we see with father or with uncle, they're expected to be always strong, and them not get the environment to like express themselves in a way where them can, you know, just make it come out, like little come out of your brain for just tell somebody, say, this is what I'm going through and how best you can help me. So it's a big issue. We don't create the space for our men in society to get help when it comes on to mental health, and overall mental health is just tabooed in Jamaica. So it's, again, we can't say it enough, it's a serious issue that we need to address.
All right, thank you so much. Karen, Dashawn, Noel, please stay with us. We have to take the break, and when we return, we tackle the issue of violence against children, and we'll start with you, Dashawn. We take the break.
Who shops at Creative Building Finishes? You, the homeowner who creates luxurious spaces with our floor and wall tiles. The contractor and builder who are convinced that our ceramic tiles are right for the job. The architect and designer who make dreams come true with our wood look and porcelain tiles. Superior customer service, knowledgeable staff, inviting showroom, and you get where this is going, right? Shop 5 Red Hills Road or call 876-929-5553. Get tiles, get Creative Building Finishes.
The environment takes center stage this Labor Day, Friday, May 23, under the theme, The Environment, Our Land, Our Duty, Our Future. Play your part in preserving our environment. Put some voluntary labor into Labor Day in your community, anywhere across Jamaica. Jamaica Nice, protect with paradise.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice, and we are joined by Noel, Karen, and Dashawn, and we're talking about advancing child rights in Jamaica from the perspectives of these youngsters, I think all in their early 20s. And it's just important to hear their views on issues. Now, one of the challenges plaguing our nation is the high level of violence that we see in our society. I think when we look at matters in terms of violence within the homes, even if the child is not the direct victim, witnessing issues of domestic violence, for example, would have lasting effects, which is psychological harm to our children. So I just want to start by hearing from Dashawn. And Dashawn, when I just mentioned in early 20s, I saw the expression on your face. So I hope I'm not also not quoting your age group in
Oh, you're close. Yeah.
all right, but I'll start with you, Dashawn. What exactly is the concern that you have when you talk about violence against our children?
So, as would have been mentioned or brought up in previous discussions, we see in Jamaica and somewhat across the globe that violence is not only common, but it's also deeply entrenched. And so, you have statistics, very alarming and sobering statistics, speaking to the fact that 3 in every 4 children would have experienced some sort of violence. And then you can even further disaggregate those statistics and point out the fact that or women and young women and girls are victim or fall victim to instances of gender-based violence and violence being perpetuated against them by virtue of or simply because of their gender. And so, as Noah would have said, I'm glad that we kind of segue from his conversation into this one. Um, it's a deeply entrenched issue and one that requires quite a lot of behavior change as well as policy change. So, on one hand, with regards to behavior, we have to realize that some of the socialization tactics and mechanisms that we have within our country are detrimental and have negative implications. Noel would have mentioned that when it comes on to young men and mental issues, men are taught to bottle up their emotions. They are taught emotional regulation. And what does this mean for their interactions with others, their interactions with women, and their interactions with their peers? This means that they no longer know how to amicably resolve conflicts. That at every chance they believe that the proper way or the best solution to an issue, to a dispute, is to lash out or to act violently. And of course, this isn't limited to young men, but especially within recent times, unfortunately, with the situation with Kelsey Ferion and other victims, we have seen an increased perpetuation of violence against young women. And so that's definitely a conversation that needs to be had, and a discussion around one, how are we raising our young men to ensure that they themselves don't grow up to perpetuate these instances of violence,
Become
and
abusers
also
themselves, yeah.
abuses, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of times children are very much reflecting what they see in their household. So they see something or they experience something at home, it's not properly dealt with, and so they go out into their environments and they replicate that scenario, or they've internalized that, oh, this is the best way that I can deal with this situation. And so that's an issue that needs to address, but also the issue of why or men or why individuals within our society feel so emboldened to commit these atrocities, and whether or not we're actually effectively holding them accountable.
Yeah, thank you so much. Karen, I want to get your perspective about violence within the home being committed against our children, because corporal punishment has been outlawed when it comes to within child state institutions, for example, a state care facility. There's policy directive when it comes to corporal punishment within schools, but policy and law, two different things. And it remains legal within the household, where a parent can instill discipline against their child. And I use the word discipline here, but we know sometimes, unfortunately, parents take discipline a little bit too far, and you use the belt buckles, for example, and there is wounding as a result. From your perspective, Karen, how do we tackle the issue of violence against children within the home, specifically when you look, for example, at corporal punishment?
So, as it relates to corporal punishment, I want to start by saying that within the home, this is something that very much does play into this, as Dashan would have said, this culture of violence or acceptable violence that we have in Jamaica specifically. And again, going back to what Noah would have said in terms of mental health and Again, what Dashawn said, and you would have mentioned in terms of witnessing or being subject to forms of violence, and then deeming that these things are acceptable and taking those views into the public space and into your interactions with others. It's very clear how corporal punishment can affect children in their day-to-day interactions and generally just their worldview, which of course is going to have implications for them when they become adults and so on. In terms of addressing it now, I would like to say that this is something that, again, the root of the issue needs to be addressed. It's a cultural change that needs to happen. I think one thing I've seen happening now, I don't remember the exact name of the organization. I think it might be Healthy Parenting JA, where they focus on trying to provide or equip parents with the skills to discipline their children in a way that does not, again, reinforce this culture of violence, still enables you to bring your children up to be respectful to their peers, their people in authority, to people around them, but also in terms of ensuring that parents are equipped to also hear their children out and have a dialogue with them. Because, again, some of the instances where corporal punishment is used, it really ties back into the sentiment that we see in Jamaica that children should be seen and not heard. So, again, just tying back into addressing all of those things that really contribute to this culture where we deem that corporal punishment is acceptable.
Yes. And just to add to that before I go to Noel, I think it's important that the government moves with the legislative framework to completely ban corporal punishment in all settings, but accompanying that with socio-cultural public education change, behavior change that Karen mentioned. We have the different forms of violence, Noel, physical, psychological harm, and sexual violence. From your perspective, what should we be doing differently in really addressing the issue of sexual violence against our children?
Okay, so I was going to say, like, some of the mentality that we have now is, from the past. However, where I grew up, like, I always hear them say, one time when it come on to like women and young girls, trouble them, like people don't trouble them, you protect them. And we grew as well, so you protect your sisters and you protect your mother as well. So I think when it comes on to like violence or sexual acts against women and girls, it's something that it's not totally new, but it's becoming more prevalent in our society. And I think what we can do firstly is to ensure that, one, I don't know how we can fix the cultural issue, because unless we are going to ban certain things in the media and regulate the music that young people listen to as well, because that perpetuates the situation. So the government have to take some drastic measures, because they must try as best as possible to protect the social well-being of the country and the citizens in the country. So whether it is to regulate the music or to ensure that certain media are not published to encourage certain behavior in our society, and as well legislation is always important when it comes on to addressing these issues. So we need stronger legislations to deter these acts, because I feel like if persons know that, guess what, if you do this, there's that chance that the consequences of the action would be this, and them not want it, so it would be less. So we have to back whatever actions we will take to address the issue. We have to back it with law. So definitely we need a socialization of our population when it comes on to sexual harassment or
30
rape,
more seconds, we have to wrap up.
Along that lines when it comes on to young girls in our society and women. And also we need to ensure that we are moving quickly with the legislations to back these actions to deter persons from committing them in our society as best as possible.
Absolutely. And, as I say, thank you to all three. As parents of boy children, teach your boys the concept of consent. I can't stress that enough, right? And it's important. And our girls as well to understand consent, because many times our girl children believe that, unfortunately, they were pressured into saying yes, and we're not able to identify what sexual assault and rape is. If you go on UA campus, you will be surprised to hear incidents being outlined to you, and when it was or when it is, you will say, but no rape that. But in the moment, so it's a lot of the sociocultural issues. But anyway, thank you so much to Noel Lewin, Karen Dawson, and Dashawn Carter. Very, very impressive young people. Best of luck in your studies. I know you will do well, and I hope to have you one day again here on the show. The answer for the question that was asked, what age can a child access medical care on their own without parental consent, is age 16 years old. Which is why when we talk about age of consent, it's not age of consent to have sex. And that's something I think one day we need to properly explain what age of consent means, because I see some of us were saying, yes, we should increase it. But as a young child said to me one day, Miss Jackson, you increase the age of consent, but you not change our behavior. You think that's going to stop us from having sex? So we have to start looking at, healthy, comprehensive sexual education. I spoke about the principle of agency at the start of the show. And sexual and reproductive conversations, we can have that another day. I see Dashawn smiling here on Zoom. I'm sorry I'm not able to take some of his perspective, but it's another conversation to have. What exactly does this mean? And one of the things that civil society, especially those in the HIV sector and child-focused agencies, have been calling for is that there needs to be some latitude in law that will allow a healthcare provider to be able to provide medical services to children under 16 without their parents, once it is that they believe it is in the best interest of the child. Because sometimes it's the parent or someone who is their caregiver is the abuser. You can't call the abuser for permission. So it's a nuanced situation that we have to be looking at. But anyway, we're upon time. So let me close out with the winner of the trivia question. And that is Rick NYCJM. You won. And you can contact our team at 239-7583 to receive your prize. Thank you so much. It was good having you all with us. And thank you so much to our listeners. And you will see us again next week, Monday at 1 p.m. on the Let's Start Justice radio show.
Jamaicans, for justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Fairview Medical and Dental and Fairview Beachside Medical, the leading health centers, operate 24/7 with round-the-clock ambulance, emergency, and inpatient services, with specialties in areas like primary health care, pediatrics,